Oh, good evening and welcome to About the Valley, and we're down to the wire. Of course, a lot of people have voted already, but we're down to the wire. It's Tuesday, coming up real fast now. But we have our final guest prior to the election, Jen Caissie. Jen has been here a number of times, so you can't come here even when there's not an election.
Well, Harry, I love the conversations that we have, everything from politics to sports to we
Yeah.
even mix in a little
Yeah.
cuisine and food.
And of course, Jen is running for re-election to Governor's Council, the only Republican on the Governor's Council.
I am. I was in 2016 when I was reelected in a presidential year. I became the first Republican reelected to the council since 1965 when a gal named Margaret Heckler was reelected to the governor's council, who went on to become Ronald Reagan's ambassador to Ireland. So
Yes.
with a last
She
name
was
like
also a congresswoman.
yes, so with a last name like Caissie, I can hope for an ambassadorship to Ireland, right?
Well, you never know. I mean, you see where, what's her name, Nordfeld, I believe. She was a news reader on Fox News. She's an undersecretary now at the
Yes.
state in the Secretary of State's office,
Yes.
and she's been nominated by Trump. She hasn't accepted yet to become the new UN ambassador.
Wow.
Get her first name now, Deborah Nor. I forgot now. But I mean, you never know.
Who knows?
Donald Trump does reach out to people who really aren't that well known nationally for positions.
Yeah, whether people like him or not, one of the things that he's built his career around is recognizing talent and
Yes.
and
And who's going to do the best job for me, the way I want the country run? And I got to hand it to him. He's got to be doing something right. We're doing pretty good right now.
yeah, the economy's humming.
Like him or not, whether you like him personally or not, he's done good for the economy. I don't care what anybody says. It the last 2 years have really been great, and getting better.
Yeah, the economy, the jobless, unemployment rates, historic lows.
Yeah.
Jobs are up. You see help wanted signs everywhere. So the economy is undeniably just humming along at a pace we haven't seen in over a decade.
And it could be a year where we see a lot of things happen in Massachusetts that we didn't expect. I mean, the governor, people could out and vote for him, but with the polls, he looks pretty darn good. I mean,
68% approval rating.
Yeah.
Might even be higher than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I heard the last time I heard, Gonzalez was only polling at 30%.
I read that poll and his name recognition was below 20%. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the Baker Polito team has to be feeling really good. And they've run a good campaign, too. I mean,
Yeah.
they've worked really hard. I see the Lieutenant Governor Polito every Wednesday in Boston at the Governor's Council. I see the governor, I speak to the governor, and they're working really, really hard to earn people's votes. They're not taking anything for granted, and I can attest to how hard they're working because I see them all around my district, and that's just a quarter of the state. Oh, excuse me, 1/8 of the state.
And Karen, she's been out here I don't know how many times. They come out and they work with the towns. They work with the selectmen, with the mayors, with the city councils. They come out and meet with them to see what they can do. So it's not like they're sitting up there and nothing's happening.
No, and they've appointed, as a member of the Governor's Council, we're the final approval of all the lifetime appointed judges here in the Commonwealth. And the Baker Polito team has nominated over 100 judicial appointments, all of who have been confirmed by the Governor's Council. And as the only Republican with 7 other Democrats, it speaks to the caliber of the candidates, including 5 new Massachusetts Supreme Court appointments who were all confirmed unanimously. So, the Baker Polito team did their homework, and they put some good people on the Mass Supreme Court, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, you got to say, I mean, you're only one vote. They need to get a majority of votes, a majority of 7, and out of the 7, 6 of them are Democrats.
No, 8. There's 8 of us, so
there's
7 of the 8 are Democrats.
Oh, okay. There's 8 people on the governor's council.
Yes.
You think there would be an odd number?
Well, here's what happens. Sometimes you can have a tie where it's 4
Yeah.
and
Oh,
4.
so then the lieutenant governor comes in and breaks the tie.
She becomes a voting member of the council, but only if the governor is present. And one of the little known facts about the Governor's Council in recent years was under the Patrick administration, they tried to change the Mass Constitution so the governor would not have to be physically present in our chamber for the lieutenant governor to become a voting member and break a tie because he wanted to be elsewhere campaigning.
Yeah.
So he actually asked the Mass Supreme Court for what's called an advisory opinion, relieving him of his obligation to be present during the ties. And I went to the administration and said, you can't do this. And I had the help of another colleague on the council. I said, you want to change the Constitution. There's a reason why it is the way it is, and it's important for the governor to be present. If there's a tie, that means there's some type of controversy with a nominee, and the
Right.
governor needs to be present per the Mass Constitution. So we fought the administration and were able to solicit funds to retain our own council, the governor's council, and my colleagues, all Democrats, selected me to be the person to go out and find the lawyer who was going to represent the council. I don't know if they thought I was going to pick a terrible lawyer, or they just, they said, you go find the lawyer, this is your idea. And I did. I went and found Mel Greenberg, retired appellate court, a Mass Appeals Court judge, who defended the council in front of the Massachusetts Supreme Court, and we beat Deval Patrick in front of the Mass Supreme Court, and the Constitution was not changed. A lot of people don't even know that happened. They don't know anything about it, but I was pretty proud of that.
I don't see how they could even have a discussion on it. It's written in the Constitution. The court should say, wait, here's what's written, and if you change it, you're violating the Constitution.
Essentially, they did say that, but they did try to make it so an advisory opinion would basically be used as a basis to circumvent the Mass
Right.
Constitution so he wouldn't have to appear. And that became a very crucial issue after Lieutenant Governor Murray resigned. So then
yeah.
a 4-4 meant that it failed. And that happened a number of times with Governor Patrick.
Well, yeah, because under the federal Constitution, we have an amendment now that if the president or vice president dies, the Congress has to work with the president to appoint a new one.
there's no provision in the Mass Constitution for the reappointment of a
Right,
lieutenant governor.
we don't have that in the Mass
No.
Con. If the lieutenant governor resigns or he dies or he or she dies, they don't replace them until the
right.
next election.
It was several months that this was the case.
Yeah.
So we did have a number of ties, and I'll never forget the first tie. The governor was presiding, and the roll call was called on a nominee, and the person who calls for the roll call reported 4-4, governor, motion fails. And he kind of just looked around, and he's realized, and, I'd like to think that I played a small part in turning up the accountability on the appointments of some of these judges. And after that, there were people who were very weak candidates who were withdrawn prior to votes. And,
Knowing you wouldn't get the vote.
knowing you wouldn't get the vote. And, I like to put it in perspective for people, Harry. Prior to January of 2011, when I took my seat, and again, it's not just me, I came on with some new people who I've been able to work with. There hadn't been a single nominee out of hundreds of judicial nominees, lifetime appointed judicial nominees, and and they don't always get there to us because they're the best candidate, okay?
Right.
Sometimes it's the size of the check that they write.
Oh,
And
yes.
that bothers me a lot.
Yep.
But prior to January of 2011, there hadn't been a single nominee defeated in hundreds of nominees in 5 years. And since 2011, I want to say, to hold me to it, approximately 12 to 15 nominees have been voted down and or their candidacies withdrawn because they know that they didn't have the votes. And not that you ever want to say no. I don't take any pleasure in that. And when I do say no, I do it respectfully. But not everybody's qualified. Not everybody
Right.
should be a judge.
The thing is that a lot of people don't realize, judges make a good salary now.
$185,000 a year,
Yeah, $185,000. You don't work that many hours.
Monday through Friday.
Yep. If you're an attorney, to make that kind of money, you're going to put in a lot of time. You know, you're an attorney.
I'm an attorney who's self-employed. I understand that concept very well.
Yeah, so you could hope to make that a year.
That'd be a pretty good year.
Yeah. So it's not a bad position to get into.
No, it's for life.
And you're there for life. You don't have to worry about ever losing your job. What is it? What's the mandatory retirement age?
70.
70 now. So 2 years. And then you retire with 80% of your paycheck. So it's not a bad job. And your medical and everything else.
And most of the people who go on the bench, most of the judges are so appreciative. They think they have the best job in the world. And, you know, I talk to some people who have gone through, well, I've been on the council, and they wake up and they pinch themselves. They're so grateful to be there. They treat the public with respect. They do
Yep.
a great job. But we also have the flip side of that, where we have certain judges who have made some pretty horrible decisions lately. Judge Feely,
Oh.
the judge in the Officer Gannon case, Sergeant Chestnut. You got people letting career criminals walk out of jail walk out of court without bail. Officer Tarantino, right in Auburn, down the road from where we are. And I'm pushing for judicial accountability legislation and to change the Mass Constitution so judges have to come back to the council every 6 years, just like we do with workers' compensation judges, to be reviewed and reconfirmed.
That's a good idea. You know, in a lot of states, judges are elected, so they have to be accountable when their term comes up to the people. In Massachusetts, they're appointed for life. So once you get in there, I do whatever I want. Nothing can happen to me. I mean, they have impeachment proceedings, but it's almost impossible. Very rarely do they do it.
And let me say this, there's a happy medium, a happy balance between elections of judges, which I don't favor because that's too political, and zero accountability, which is what we have right now in Massachusetts. We have to find that healthy balance, and that's what I want to start a conversation about. But it's going to take guts, and it's going to take courage to get to that point.
Oh, got a phone call. Let me get this to work properly. Go ahead, you're on. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. Now I'll get the speaker working. Go ahead.
Hey, this is Sheriff Lou Evangelitis calling in, Harry. How are you?
Hi, Sheriff. How you doing?
I'm great. How's Jen Caissie tonight?
Jen is always fantastic on here. We have great conversation. We get into the real nitty-gritty about what it's like to be a governor's counselor. A lot of people don't realize what that job entails.
No, a lot of people don't understand it's one of the most important jobs we have in government. It can actually, determine whether someone gets a lifetime appointment. And I wanted to call in, Harry, one, because you've been a great friend and I enjoy your show, but secondly, is Jen Caissie has been one of the most, really one of the truest friends I have, not only in politics, but just someone I immensely respect the job she does. She's the best, and I know she's up for re-election, and she's been working so hard, and I just want people to know, if you want somebody to be governor's counselor who understands the gravity of her job and does an exceptional job, it's Jen Caissie. She's the best.
You think about it, she has to go through this every 2 years, and it's not easy running for governor's council because you're talking, like your position is 6 years. You have to run through the whole county. She does the same thing. But every 2 years. She does it
every 2 years, Harry. It's incredible, but her tenacity is second to none, and she does it with a smile, and she does it with with just a graciousness she has. So God bless her. She's somebody I've supported. We kind of came into this together as the first Republicans to run countywide successfully in decades, and that really, we had a real bond from not only, spending day after day on the campaign trail, but now having worked together for those 8 years too. She's really something special. I want you to know that. I hold her in extremely high regard. She's exceptional.
Sheriff, you're pretty exceptional yourself, and it's funny. I remember 2010, and I saw you more than any other family member, more than my mom, my dad, my then boyfriend, now husband.
We were then campaigning together.
Yeah, and one thing I always remember, Sheriff, is that you and I, if we'd gone to 10 events in a day and there was one more to go to, whether it was across county, whether we were in Uxbridge and it was in Clinton, or we were in Clinton and it was in Webster, we'd look at each other and we both could have said, we're tired, but we pushed each other. I was real proud of the campaign you ran and I ran. And to this day, we still joke and I say, we would have had a woman sheriff in Worcester County if I'd have known he had a 6-year term and I only had a 2-year term. But we joke about that. But he's an amazing guy, what he does for the folks in this entire county with coat drives and food drives. You've been, an inspiration to me, and I mean that. I've attended some of your Worcester County Deputy Sheriff dinners, and what you do for the people that a lot of people don't know about. You change lives in a meaningful way, and I get a ton of respect for you for doing what you do.
I got to tell you, Sheriff, one thing you did, you changed that whole deputy sheriff program from what it used to be. More or less, you took care of the people who helped you get elected. It's no longer. It's really a viable program that does a lot of good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a charitable organization, 100%, and we really cherish the fact that, it's an opportunity to help the community, whether it be a coat drive, food drive, the senior picnic, which is a wonderful celebration, other ways we can make donations. It's wonderful, just sort of organization to have, and be part of. But, like I said, Jen has been in almost every event we've done. If you've ever attended the senior picnic, you can thank Jen Caissie for rescuing us on more than one occasion, whether it be with, corn for the seniors because we didn't have a supplier, or because we needed some volunteers. And as you may know, she's on the board of directors at Nichols College, and she arranged to have the entire football team come volunteer for us the last 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And they really made the event special. And again, we owe Jen Caissie for that. So she's been a big part of that organization, Harry, whether you even realize it or not. Jen's been right there with me.
And she represents the county well over in Boston as well, too. And
Yeah, well, I'm sure you're talking about that tonight, but Jen knows. I mean, like I said, these are lifetime appointments, and they really need to be vetted, and you need
Yes.
someone who's willing to ask the tough questions and to take a stand, whether it's popular or not. She's been fearless up there, and I'm telling you, if we had I wish we had more like Jen Caissie, but we got one, and we're going to keep her.
yes. So how are things going up at the jail? See, I don't hear anything bad there anymore.
Well, that's sometimes the biggest compliment we get, Harry. But, I think we're doing great. I'm in my second term now, 8 years.
Yes.
I feel like it took a long time to get our footprint on a place that's so big and had so much history. And we really changed the hiring standards. We've changed the promotional standards. And we really tried to just encourage, top flight people to apply and promote the right people. And 8 years later, I can tell you that we have an unbelievable dedicated team of folks that work there every day, and in the community correction centers where we try to keep people out of jail and keep them basically, for $4,000 a year, we maintain and oversee them out of their homes through a correction center, as opposed to 50,000 incarcerated. So between the jail and our community correction systems, I can tell you, Harry, we have accumulated just an extraordinary group of people that are dedicated to keep people off the streets, try to keep criminals off the street, incarcerated, and at the same time is turn people's lives around when and if they're interested in doing so by offering them legitimate programs if they want to meet us halfway. Don't coddle people, give people opportunities. And if they're serious about changing their ways, we're here to help them, because when they get out, our goal is to make them less likely to hurt you and your family and us, and that's how you do it. But it's been a great 8 years, Harry, and, I love my job, and I say when I get a chance to work with partners like Jen Caissie, it's really rewarding.
Yes. Like I said, we don't hear anything bad up there, so that means you're doing a good job.
Sometimes that's the best compliment you get.
Yeah, it
Right.
is. Well, Sheriff, you're the best. Back at you.
Hey, thank you for calling in, Sheriff.
Absolutely, Harry. Great to talk to you again. And again, Jen, nothing but the best. You've run another amazing campaign. I've watched you, this year as well as others, and I will say you outwork anybody I've ever seen in this business. You're really something, and you've done it again. So congratulations and all the best next Tuesday. I'm quite sure you're going to do well.
Thank you.
And I'll get a hold of Kim and see if we can get you in here one of these nights.
Absolutely, Harry. I love coming on. We'll arrange that.
Yeah. And he doesn't come on just when he's running for re-election.
No,
He comes
I
on, like you, he comes on all the time.
It's a good
All
guy.
right, great
Yeah, well, I'll
talking to
do
you.
it again. So let me know. We'll have me in there hopefully soon.
Great.
Take care, Sheriff.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Okay, guys. Yep. See ya.
Goodbye. That was nice of him to call in.
Yeah, he's all over the place.
Yes.
He really is, and
Yes.
he's out there. He's, as you said, he comes in here when he's not just running for re-election. He's a person who wakes up and goes to
And his,
goes to work every
program
day.
where he has the prisoners go out and work in the communities. That saves tremendous amounts of money in these communities. We have them out here. They come out every year to clean up the cemeteries before Memorial Day for it. we don't have a big DPW staff, and they couldn't handle it. He saves them tremendous money by doing that. He painted their studio here.
I think you mentioned that to me.
Yeah. It was his guys came in and painted our studio, and he does that stuff all the time, all over the place. And it's great that the county has that service, and the prisoners enjoy it because they get out.
And they get a day's work, and they're proud of their
Yes.
work, and they see the fruits of their labor. And I was fortunate enough, I was still on the Board of Selectmen in Oxford. I was chairman. I ran for election in 2010 for 2 seats, to stay on the Board of Selectmen because I love the local community and making an impact, and for Governor's Council. And I was re-elected to both. And it was tough juggling both, but I finished my term as a selectman, and I had an opportunity to work with Sheriff Lou as a selectman. And so when you talk about these local projects and the money that they
Yes.
save the communities when we're struggling to fund our schools, and it really adds up to, a teacher or a program. And you really can't say enough about it, whether it's painting or cleaning up a cemetery. Right. It's invaluable to the local cities and towns.
You mentioned you were a selectman. I think it's important, anyone who goes for countywide or statewide office, having one time been a selectman, because you really know what it's like in these towns and what the towns are up against, because you see it.
You see it, and I learned just what you learn. If you go, I would go to every meeting. I got elected at 23. What do you know at 23? Not much, right?
Right.
But at least if you know you don't know much, you're open to learning.
Yes.
And I was never a know-it-all. To this day, I look forward to every day as an education. I'm going to learn something new, meet somebody new. But, you learn so much about budgets. You really learn
Right.
about the senior citizens. When we talk about senior citizens having to make a choice between prescriptions or paying their real estate taxes, that's real.
Oh,
That's
yes.
not a political talking point.
No, it's very
And-
real.
And you learn about the schools and how they need money, and you want to keep the programs going. You learn about the Balancing Act, the DPW, what those men and women do to keep your streets safe. And you learn about government waste, and you hear how it happens. But the educational part of that is a selectman, and we were also police commissioners. So we did the hiring.
Yeah,
of
police, water, if you have a sewer department, you're the sewer commissioner, you do it all.
You do it all, and you learn a ton. And I ran in 1997 at the ripe old age of 23. I was still in law school. I ran on a simple platform about public safety. I wanted safe streets. I wanted our kids to be safe, community safe, good police officers. And infrastructure was another big part of my campaign. But, to this day, in doing the job and accountability, that was part of, 23 years old, I said, you got to be accountable to the people you represent, and never forget that you represent them. They don't work for you.
Right.
I've never lost track of that. And, fast forward to 2010, I ran on public safety and victims' rights as a member of the Governor's Council. And, it's just something that I've stuck with. But I think I missed the local, and Sheriff Lou, he was a state representative, so he
Yes.
gets how it works up in Boston on Beacon Hill, and, I can't say enough good about him, and
Well, he was
Karen
a-
Polito was a selectman,
Yeah,
Charlie Baker,
yeah.
so they get it.
Well, Lou, I think, worked in town government in a volunteer position prior to running for state rep.
I think you're right. I don't know if he was a selectman.
He
I'd have
wasn't
to ask
selectman,
him.
but I think he was on a board, on some of the boards. Usually everybody is, because you get involved, you get involved in politics at your local level first, and then you work your way up.
That's how I think that's the best bird's eye view you can get, because otherwise if you jump into it, I see people getting in now. It's a tough climate out there politically. It's people are, it's almost like at this point of the campaign, I almost call it the defamation, segment of the campaign, where
Right.
people just say and do terrible things to opponents, to other people in the political arena. And I guess you have to have thick skin, but it's
You gotta be able to let it roll off your back. I've been on the planning board. I was off for a little while, but combined now, be close to 20 years, 18 years.
wow, congratulations. That's an
And-
important board in communities. I don't think everybody realizes
And
that.
I always say to people, they're not happy with me, I say, fine, don't vote me in, I won't miss the paycheck.
Yeah, that's the other thing about local.
Right.
You love it. You do it for a reason. 'Cause
Right.
You love it.
But we're having a hard time getting people to run today for office.
I know.
People have asked me, why don't you run for selectman? I says, no, I don't want to be a selectman. Number one, you gotta want it. And number two, that's the most thankless position in the town. And next is school committee, and then you get down to the planning board, but we don't get much flack, because we, you know, you go by what the laws are and what,
Pretty cut and dry.
yeah.
An A&R or not an A&R.
Right.
I did 3 years on the planning board
Yeah.
after, in
You
between
know,
my
and
select.
you got your subdivision rules and regs that you might change them, and you can have effect that way, but for the most part, it's cut and dry. But you're on the school committee, you deal with that budget, and people don't like what you're doing here, or they don't like this, they don't like the curriculum, they don't like people you hire. Same with the Board of Selectmen.
You know, you talk about the local stuff. I think one of the most important things, and I'm sure you've had the same experience in 20 years, but you learn that, you know what, you can have a conversation, you can agree to disagree.
Right.
Have a spirited conversation. Everybody brings their ideas to the table, and you walk out and you shake hands and you see your
Right.
colleague who you just sparred with at the coffee shop, and you say hi on Sunday morning. And that's how it's supposed to be, and that's the type of politics that I learned. That's in my DNA. But today,
It's
to
gotten away
disagree,
from that. It become, it's a hate you.
it's a hate. It's
Yeah.
a hate.
You don't agree with me, I hate you.
Yeah, you can't even you can't have a conversation with certain people. And I guess that's not how I learned how to, how to conduct myself in public or to other human beings. I mean, I have really far left-leaning friends. I'm not a far left-leaning person. And I can have a conversation with them. And some of them can have conversations with me, but some of them just, I mean, it's just like this, I don't know, it's like a switch. They
You either
can't,
gotta agree or there's no disagreeing. You gotta agree with them or else forget it.
or you're all these awful things.
Yeah, and
It's
that's,
disheartening.
it is, and it really discourages people from running for public office.
Oh, it's brutal now with the social media. I mean, some people call Facebook hate book, because they can put anything they want up there. Some of it's true, some of it's not. Inaccuracies, and it's out there forever. And people, whether you agree with them or not, they have families, they have children, they're trying to do the right thing, whether you are with them ideologically or not. And I just think everybody wants to blame the president for the lack of incivility, but there's a lot of blame to go around.
Before he came on the scene, there was instability about it. That was out there before that, and I think it's the social media brought a lot of it on.
And then they want to point the finger at everybody else.
Right, and you're right. They can put anything they want on there, and we talk about the crisis now with bullying in the schools. Well, I went to school a long time, very long ago, and I know you've been a while since you've been in
Yeah, it's
school.
just a couple years.
You didn't have the social media,
No.
so if there was bullying, yeah, you might have had it while you were in school, and it was limited in between classes or something. But now it's 24 hours because they're doing it on social media, and it's really very crippling to some kids. I mean, they feel totally. Teenagers always have they want to be accepted by everyone, and it's so easy to turn on them and make them feel like they're rejected. It might be only one person doing it, but they feel everyone's rejecting them.
Right, and when that happens, it's the biggest crisis in their life, and then
Yeah.
you have these terrible results where kids are hurting themselves, or worse,
Well, they're
even
committing
worse,
suicide.
taking their own lives.
Yeah.
And it's a very sad but serious problem. And when we grew up, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm not advocating violence, but you'd punch the playground bully in the nose, and that was it. You
That was
both
the end
go
of
to
it,
the
yeah.
principal's office, and you
Yeah.
both the parents get called, and you go home, and you get in big
Right.
trouble, right? And that was the end of it. And the bully was not the bully anymore, right?
But it's not physical anymore because it's all
No.
done on that social
And
media.
everybody can see it, and it's
Yeah.
hurtful, and
And it's easy, they don't even have phone conversations anymore, texting. Well, it's very easy to say vile things when you text. It's a lot harder to say something in person.
I don't know, I mean, there has to be, I'm glad to see the campaign against bullying catching momentum and steam, but that's going to be a real educational issue where that's going to be incorporated into the schools. It should almost be part of the curriculum. And I'm going to say something outrageous right now, as should be civics, where you have college students who cannot articulate the three branches of government. They can't name 2 United States Supreme Court justices, but they can tell you the first 5 people to win American Idol. And we get a real problem with civics, but also the bullying. I mean, it's all about education, and I think that we need to teach our kids that is very, very hurtful. I mean, I'm an adult, and sometimes I'll read something online that I know isn't true, okay?
Right.
Because I didn't say this, it means I advocate violence against women, which is just an absolutely outrageous statement to make on so many levels. But we get to educate. So if that, I find that to be offensive, you know, I'm not going to go sit in a corner and cry. I'm not going to physically hurt myself. But you put a 16-year-old, you know, young person in a situation where somebody's saying some terrible things about them, you know, they're going to react in a way that they're going to either hurt themselves, hurt somebody else, do
Right.
something. And we need to address that problem in our schools. And, you know, I think we have seen that issue with the Governor's Council, you know, the issue of bullying, where we asked judges, judicial nominees, about that issue and how they would handle it. And it's becoming more and more of a prevalent form of questioning, you know, for the judicial nominees, as far as, I think that you really need to be really strict with the people who are doing it, and there needs to be messages sent. Like, you cannot just do this and intentionally try to hurt somebody without consequences. And usually it's going to be through the juvenile court, obviously.
Right. Yeah, how do you see the courts handling it at all, or?
Judges handle it differently. The
It's gotta
juvenile,
be a tough situation. You're talking very young kids
Right.
in a lot of cases.
immature.
Yeah,
You know, I think that it's a serious problem that they are taking seriously. You know, and it goes to tough love, I think, in a lot of ways, that you have to, you know, somebody has to, you know, unfortunately be an example, and then the other kids in the school hear about it and they say, oh gosh, look what happened to Johnny or Susie. I mean, you know, we're gonna, and the school policies and that kind of stuff, but.
I mean, today, in the schools today, because it's required, all the kids are in the class. I mean, when I went to school, if a kid was really totally disabled, they didn't get to go to the regular school. Now they do. They want, and I can understand, call me, those kids deserve to get in there, but some of them can be a real problem.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get into the special education issue, but I know that for some communities, it is crippling to their budget, where if they have
Oh,
to
my
accommodate, you're talking upwards of $100,000 per student annually to accommodate. And I don't know what the answer is to that. I mean, it's a community by community issue as far as how they pay for it. But, you know, that's something that, when you talk about education funding, that the state should look at. But
Well, in that case, I brought this up, oh God, 20 years ago. I've been doing this show for 25 years with a superintendent way back then. He agreed with me, and every one of them since. The money for special ed that the state supplies should follow the student. What they do now is, prior to the school year, you send in your roster, and they say, okay, that child is going to this, we'll say, going to Grafton High School. So then the money goes to Grafton. But in the meantime, during the school year, if that child moves to Northbridge, the money doesn't come to Northbridge. It stays in Grafton until the following year, when that child's in the next grade, and then they submit it again. So what can happen, if someone moves midterm or early term even, that school's picking up the tab, and we're talking lots of money in some cases, and they don't get reimbursed for it. So that can be a problem. That's one of the biggest problems with that.
I think so. And I've talked to people on both sides, the parents of the child in need, and somebody who's on a local school committee and trying to deal, or a town manager or selectman saying,
Yeah.
you know, this is the implications for the budget. So, you know, I'm sure it can be addressed, but, you know, I remember the school funding was always the 800-pound gorilla in the room every annual town meeting,
Always is.
and it's hard to please everybody.
Well, when you think about it, half the town budget, you're a selectman, half your town budget is the school budget.
Half.
So over half now, yeah.
Probably close to 70%,
Yeah.
75%, so, but.
It's an unbelievable amount of money.
Yeah, and you know, The real estate taxes are not always enough to cover it, and
No.
as far as I'm concerned, we don't get enough money from the federal government. We don't, for what we pay in federal taxes, not enough money goes back to the states. And, you talk about the gaps in education funding or public safety funding in the communities. That has to be a conversation between the state officials and the federal officials, because we're not getting enough money of our federal tax dollars back.
Well, I think part of our problem, when they brought about the Department of Education, it messed everything up. Now they decided, well, we're gonna tell you what to educate the kids and how to educate and everything else, instead of just dispersing the money. If they would just say, our job is only to allocate the funds and not mandate, not tell you how to educate, not tell you what programs you're gonna do. They would save that money, because you're gonna get rid of a lot of people in the Department of Education. All you need is a small staff that would distribute the tax dollars down to the states, and then the states down to the individual school systems.
What people don't realize is that the United States Department of Education, which oversees pretty much all the educational, educational systems in the country,
Right.
federal, state, local, is
Even higher education.
Yes, is a relatively new phenomenon. It came around in the 1970s. So
Right.
I think people think in their mindset that, the Department of Ed, they think like it's been around since, 1789
Jimmy
when
Carter.
the Constitution was created, and it's not. It's a relatively new phenomenon that should be looked at and tweaked and fixed for, all the modern issues that we deal with, but it's not. It's a very archaic institution.
I'm old enough to remember when it was the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, HEW. That was back in the 50s and the 60s. I think it came in the 50s. And it oversaw the education, health, and welfare. Well, you're talking, handouts, whatever, All that got shifted around. We got the Department of Education, and they broke up the other two. You got Department of Housing now,
Health and Human Services.
Health and Human Services, see? And all it did was make a big bureaucracy and didn't change anything at the other end.
Department of Housing and Urban Development,
Housing and Urban Development,
Health and Human Services, and
Yep.
Education. So now you have
Yeah.
three.
you got three, and it used to be all in one. See? And you'd save a lot of money if you went back to the old way.
Well, I think that's where you have to always look at accountability and waste in government, and
Yep.
I don't think we do that enough. I mean, we need services.
The only place you don't have waste in government is the town level. I'm not talking cities either. Cities got waste.
Right.
Because it's so small, and the people can see so much, and they actually, you vote on the budget. I mean, we go line by line. I'm sure they do the same thing in Oxford. You go line by line on the budget at town meeting. So people can see. They may not agree with the numbers, but they see where it's going.
And they should do that at the state level more transparently to the people. And line by line, because as the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, one of the tasks is to stand up at the podium at town meeting and read line for line.
Yes.
And they've got these whoppers of numbers, and they're all, odd numbers. And
And
so,
you have to explain it.
and I would have them write at $1,262.11, and I
Yes.
would read it like a sentence, because you're up there for a couple of hours and you're going through, and then so every line item, absolutely.
And anyone can question any one of those line items. Why are you spending that on this? So it really is efficient. There's no doubt about it.
No replacing a town meeting.
No. But you get it higher up, and when you get in the federal level, forget it. You can't tell me that any congressperson or senator reads that budget. That budget is, enormous. You can't possibly go through that whole thing. And of course, they tack their own stuff on. And same with the state. Unfortunately, at the state level, we do have line item veto,
Yes.
which they tried to give to the president, but the Supreme Court ruled it down.
A couple times now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we, and it's funny, interesting, one of the tasks that we have in the Governor's Council, you talk about the budget. We sign off on the annual budget, if you will, expenses that the state is going to pay. So it goes through the comptroller's office, and then we get the warrant essentially, and we sign off on it every Wednesday. And it's almost administrative in that the comptroller's office has to certify all the expenses, and they go through it all line by line. But I am aware of instances where there have been issues, and a couple of the governor's council lords years ago wouldn't sign off on it because there was an issue with one of the expenses, and I think it was Senator Brewer I was talking to at an event up at Wachusett Community College was telling me about. I think it was a prison that they were going to build, some project that they didn't want in his neck of the woods, and so the governor's counselors got together and they wouldn't sign the warrant, and they ended up using that as an effective measure to stop it.
Was that a while ago?
That was a while ago.
Okay, that must have been in New Braintree.
Yes, you're correct. That is exactly what it was.
That was a long while ago. That was under the Dukakis administration.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to put a huge prison in New Braintree.
It was.
What was there was a former school, private school, and they were going to take the private school and convert it over to a prison out in the middle of nowhere. If you've ever been into New Braintree,
I have.
I mean, there's nothing there. I mean, it's a back road getting into the town, and it was the people in the area were dead against it. They don't. This is not what we want here, and it did work out because it ended up becoming the training center now for the state police,
That's right.
which they're more than glad to have at that former school.
That was the story we were talking about. We were talking about the governor's
Yeah.
council a few weeks ago up at an
I
event.
stay up on all that stuff.
Yeah,
That
that's
was-
it. Yeah, once you said New Braintree, it triggered. I said, yes, that's what
Yeah.
it was in New Braintree. It was a
And if
prison.
you've ever been to New Braintree,
I have been through it.
it's back roads going in.
It is.
I mean, talk about a small community. Oh my God, I think there's more cows than people.
It's in my district.
Yeah,
I've been there.
nice little community.
It is. It's a pretty area.
And the state police have a beautiful facility there now. But Pioneer Academy, I believe, was the name of the school.
Okay.
It was a private school for, similar to the Cushing Academy, which you're probably familiar with. That's up in Ashburnham.
Yep.
So it was a private school, but it went out of business, and that was all vacant, and they looked at putting a prison there. It was also out in Warren. There was talk about putting a big landfill.
How long ago was that?
That was back in the 80s,
Okay.
and that got shot down too. Those people out there always get picked on the scenes because it's not a big population.
Well, and there's this west and east of 128
Oh,
sucking.
yes.
The east of 128 sucking sound where they get all the money and the resources, and all of us folks on the other side of 128 don't. And
And it goes back, it goes way back to the turn of the last century when, first they built the Wachusett Reservoir and took over a lot of land that belonged to the towns out there. But then they went further in the 1930s and built the Quabbin and took over, 4 towns. And I know people out there because I've worked out in that area, and they still resent the fact that the state came in, because all that water goes to Boston. Well, they get some.
right.
Springfield gets some, and they do. But for the most part, it was built to make sure the Boston area had plenty of water. And it's worked out great because they wouldn't have had enough.
Not a lot of things have changed then. If you think of the Mass Pike and the toll setup, now we don't
Yeah.
have tolls anymore, but when
Right.
we did,
Yeah.
that's what it was all about.
Exactly. And and now, we still have tolls, but you don't have to stop.
Right, right. I mean, we have the thing
Right.
over that you ride under, and
I think that has worked out good. The only thing that scares me with it, it's worked. And because it worked, now they say, oh, we could do this on 93, we could do this on 95,
true.
we could do it on 495, and pretty soon you're going to pay a toll on every road you go on.
right. And our roads in Massachusetts are atrocious. That's one of the big issues, that there's a lot of construction going on throughout the Commonwealth, which is good to see, but man, our roads are in really bad shape in this state. When you think about you can almost tell when you hit Connecticut.
Yep.
You can tell when you're hitting Rhode Island, and you can tell when you're going into New Hampshire because
New
the roads
Hampshire
are
is the
better.
best example, because New Hampshire, I forget what the numbers are, but they're about 10 times lower per mile for road construction and road rehabilitation than it is in Massachusetts.
It's because they maintain their roads and we don't.
Well, not only that, they don't have prevailing wage law, which we had it on the ballot a number of years ago, but the unions won, and we still got to pay that prevailing wage, so it raises the cost up much higher.
Sure.
I had Jeff Deal on back in February, and we talked about that.
Yeah, he's got a tough fight on his hands.
Yes, he does. I can't understand how he can be 20 points behind.
You know, there's all kinds of polls floating around out there right now in all these different races, and you know.
Well, we saw what polls did in the presidential race.
I've never been a big believer in the polls.
Not anymore. I think people are lying to them. I really do. I think when they call some people, I think they actually lie. Because we saw the opposite take place 2 years ago. I mean, if you were looking at the polls, everyone was convinced that Hillary Clinton was going to walk away with the election.
And if you went to bed at 10 o'clock that night, you thought we were waking up to President Clinton. But if
Yeah.
you stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning, like I did, because I
Yeah.
was on the ballot too, we knew we had won at that point. But
Yep.
being the junkies that we are, you know,
Yeah,
we were. It was like it's our political Super Bowl is coming up
Yeah.
Tuesday, November 6th. You know, it's not in February. For us folks, you know, if you're really
Exactly.
into it, it's
Yeah.
this Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, now you've had a challenger every time?
This will be the third time. So the first time I ran, and then I didn't have a challenger in 2 terms, which is 4 years, which is 1 term for most offices. But
Right.
and I had a challenger in 16, and I have a challenger this time. And you know, it's fine with me. You know, in some ways, as much as you're out every night, and my 6-year-old, my little daughter, says, Mommy, she said tonight, can I go on the TV show with you? I said, I don't know, I'll ask Carrie. I don't know if tonight's the night, sweetie. And she always wants to go on shows
Anytime
with me.
you can bring her in.
I'll remember that. And, you know, it can be tough on your family, but we make the most of it, and we have some fun. But you know, I get out there and I meet so many people, and I stay connected with people. And
Yep.
and I can't tell you how many folks say to me, you know, what's going on with the council on this, and what about this person? And even just feedback on nominees. This person's coming up, or I know this person. And the experiences and just reaching out and talking to people from the 65 cities and
Yep.
towns, it's so fulfilling for me.
We'll go back to the civics thing. A lot of people don't know what a governor's council is because they don't get taught it. And there's no governor's council at the federal level. There's nothing like
it's the
that.
U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee.
Yeah. In fact, it's something that's unique more or less to New England.
New Hampshire and Massachusetts are the only 2 states in the United States with a governor's
So
council.
we only got 2 states.
2.
Yeah, see, so, you know, a lot of people aren't familiar with, especially if you have people moving in from out of state, have totally no idea what that's all about.
And that's the case with a lot of these seats. And, you know, I say to people, and I really believe this, I think the governor's council is one of the most important spots on the ballot,
Yeah.
one of the most important positions, because if you think about a governor, the greatest legacy that Charlie Baker is going to leave on the people of Massachusetts is not what the economy is in 2017 or 18
That
or 19.
changes all the time.
Or what his tax policy was, or what his education policy
No, because
was.
that can be changed at
Exactly.
any time.
It's going to be who are those 5 people he put on the Massachusetts Supreme Court,
Right.
and who are the 100 judges that he's put on all the courts in the Commonwealth over the last 4 years.
If you go back to the presidential election, that was a big factor.
Who was going on the Supreme Court?
Yeah.
Sure.
Both candidates ran on that issue.
Yes, they did.
Well, here, it's not the Senate that's going to make the difference. It's the governor's council within the state. You act just like the Senate does on the federal level.
We do. And nobody, it doesn't matter how bad a governor or how bad somebody wants to become a judge, unless they get a majority vote of the governor's council, they will not be a judge in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Right.
Or a clerk magistrate, with the final approval of clerk magistrates and the Mass Parole Board, but they're not lifetime appointments, but very important positions when you think about the parole board.
Oh.
And these are people deciding whether, you know,
Extremely.
first degree murderers are going to be paroled. What are the
Yeah.
conditions of parole? Whether rapists, child rapists, you know, level 3 sex offenders. You just had that case where the man was going to be released. He'd raped, I don't know how many little boys and ruined how many lives.
Yeah, I mean,
and he was being paroled.
yeah, being paroled. I mean, come on.
But he had wrapped up his sentence, So he had finished his time, and there was nothing that the parole, to be fair, there was nothing they could do because he had finished his sentence.
Well, that's where we probably need some changes in the laws.
And Charlie Baker was on top of that, and actually that that defendant, that criminal, I want to say he attacked an officer or he did something inside the jail before he was
Yes.
released, and I think he's still being incarcerated now
Yes,
as a
I remember
result of
that,
that.
yeah.
So, I'm not sure what happened
I mean,
there,
these
but-
are people that, they got a problem. But I'm sorry, if you got a problem, you can't be on the street.
No,
Because you're gonna ruin other people's lives over it?
And that's the thing with mandatory minimum sentences. We have a big discussion right now about criminal justice reform and mandatory minimums, and some people don't support them for certain type of crimes. And that's a discussion that really has to be dissected, because I think that fentanyl dealers and heroin dealers should get mandatory minimums because they're killing people, okay? They're killing people. I think child rapists should get mandatory minimums. And I asked judicial nominees these questions, and I think it's important that we have bad people in
Now, we
jail
hear-
and good people get breaks.
I always hear that judges don't like mandatory sentences. They like to have the ability to do what they want.
Discretion.
And you also find that the prosecutors, the DAs, they don't like it. They use it as a way of negotiating something else. A great example of that is the Barkley Fox, mandatory 1 year for having a gun.
Yes,
No one's. I think one person went to jail in the last 30 years.
yes, and I think,
We gotta be going.
okay, what do we have? I think we were,
We gotta leave. We gotta go off the air.
oh, okay.
So,
I can't believe it.
Yeah.
We didn't even get to the Red Sox or the Patriots or.
no. Thanks for coming in, Jen. I wish you luck on Tuesday.
Thank
and,
you, Harry. Always a pleasure.
We'll have you back and bring your daughter with you.
All right, I'll tell Sydney. She'll
Okay.
be real happy about
Right.
that.
See you next week.